Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the noise to bring you, well, hopefully some clarity. Today, we're diving into something you might think you know all about, a shortcut many of us rely on for understanding cannabis. But what if the very labels we use are fundamentally misleading you? Yeah, we're talking about indica and sativa, those classifications, the ones that are supposedly all about effects, widely accepted, sure, but scientifically. Well, that's what we're here to unpack. For years, they've been the go-to guide. Indica for relaxing, sativa for energy. But is it really that simple? Does the science back it up? Our mission today is to cut through that noise. We'll trace the history of these terms, look at the genetics, the culture, and figure out what's really shaping your experience. We've got a great stack of sources, historical botanical records, grower guides, modern science papers, even cultural articles. We're going to try and pull out the truth behind these labels.
It's a fascinating journey, really, how these simple botanical terms transformed into these myths about effects. It says a lot about how ideas spread, and sometimes how they get distorted along the way.
Huh.
We'll follow that path, see how it happened.
Okay, let's get into it then. Where did sativa and indica even come from? Was it always about how they make you feel?
Not at all, actually. The origin is purely botanical. Think way back, 1753, Carl Linnaeus, the famous Swedish botanist.
Right, the father of taxonomy.
Exactly. He named Cannabis sativa. But he was looking at the tall, kind of skinny hemp plants grown in Europe, mostly for fiber, ropes, textiles, industrial stuff.
So sativa just meant cultivated, basically.
Pretty much, industrial hemp. Then, a few decades later, 1785, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, a French naturalist, he comes along. He observed plants in India that looked really different, shorter, bushier, much more resinous, and he called those cannabis indica.
Indica for India. Makes sense.
Right, so the key thing here is this split. It was only about geography and looks, height, leaf shape, structure, nothing about psychoactive effects. For like over 100 years, these were just scientific names, plant descriptions. That's it.
Okay, so nearly 2 centuries of purely botanical classification. When did that start to change? When did people begin associating them with different kinds of highs?
Well, the shift started picking up steam more in the 1970s. There was this sort of taxonomy revival, you could say. Ethnobotanists, Richard Schultz was a big name here. They revisited these terms, still mainly for classification, mind you.
Still about the plants themselves.
Mostly, yeah. Sativas became associated with those tall, narrow-leaf plants you find in tropical areas. Indicas were linked to the shorter, broadleaf plants, often from places known for hash production, like Afghanistan.
Okay, so the link is still primarily physical, geographical.
Exactly. Even then, while maybe some growers or users had their own ideas, there wasn't this widespread codified link between indica and sleepy or sativa and energetic in the public mind. Not yet.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? How did we get from plant shapes to couch lock versus energetic buzz? What pushed it over the edge? Did the science just get left behind?
It definitely seems that way. The big shift, the moment these effect associations really started to solidify, was in the early 1980s. It was largely driven by the growing community. A really key moment was 1981. Robert Clarke published his book, Marijuana Botany.
Ah, I've heard of that one. Influential.
Hugely influential. And crucially, it was the first time someone in print directly linked the strain type to the perceived effect. Clarke basically codified it. Narrow-leaf sativas give you that cerebral, euphoric high. Broadleaf indicas lead to sedative, body-heavy feelings.
And that just took off.
Pretty much. Seed catalogs jumped right on it. It was an easy way to market their products, tell people what to expect. It gave growers and consumers a simple framework.
Okay, so the grower circles are adopting this, but how did it break out into the wider culture? Was there like a magazine article or something that really blew it up?
Oh, definitely. You can't underestimate the power of High Times magazine back then. In 1983, they ran this article, Indica Madness.
Indica Madness, wow.
Yeah, and it was huge. It really popularized these stereotypes. There was this columnist who pretty strongly, he blasted heavy indicas body high. Very little happens to your brain.
Ouch.
Yeah, and at the same time, he was praising the cerebral sexiness of the sativa high. Strong opinions, very influential. That article basically took the ideas from the growers and shot them straight into the mainstream counterculture. That indica sativa effect difference became widespread belief.
So the idea is really taking root now, deeply ingrained. How did the digital age, the internet, and then eventually, legal dispensaries, how did they keep this going? Make it seem like solid fact.
The internet was like pouring gasoline on the fire.
Yeah.
The 90s, you had Usenet, forums like Overgrow,
Hmm.
places where people talked cannabis constantly.
Well, right. Echo chambers.
Exactly. And this simple Indica Sativa story got repeated over and over. It wasn't just underground either. You had mainstream pieces like Michael Pollan wrote for the New York Times in '95, reinforcing it. Indica, narcotic stone. Sativa, stimulating high.
So it felt like it was coming from everywhere.
Pretty much. Then fast forward to the 2000s, 2010s as legalization starts happening.
Dispensaries needed a simple way to sell stuff.
Precisely. Retailers fully embrace this shortcut. It's just easy, right? Indica for sleep, pain, sativa for creativity, energy, easy to explain, easy for customers to grasp. Think about platforms like Leafly. Their color coding, the effect tags. It made this classification look like settled science. Constant repetition, easy visuals.
It really does raise that question, doesn't it? Why did this convenient but maybe inaccurate binary system become so dominant in marketing?
Because simple sells,
Mm.
especially when the reality is complex.
Okay, so we've followed the story of how these labels got tangled up with effects. Now for the reality check. What does modern, rigorous science actually say? Are indicas and sativas genuinely different chemically in ways that explain these effects?
This is where the whole narrative kind of falls apart, scientifically
Right.
speaking. Modern genetics tells a very different story. The bottom line is there's no clear, consistent genetic dividing line between plants labeled indica and sativa that actually correlates with their psychoactive effects. It's just not there in the DNA in a predictable way.
The lines are blurred.
Extremely blurred. And think about it, almost everything on the market today is a hybrid, years and years of crossbreeding. These plants are complex genetic mixes. So those original definitions from Linnaeus or Lamarck, they hardly apply anymore to what people are actually consuming.
So you could have two plants both labeled indica, but they might feel completely different.
Absolutely. And that's the crucial point. It's not about the label or the leaf shape or the plant height anymore. It's about the chemistry inside that specific plant.
Okay, so if it's not the indica sativa label, what is driving the experience? What should we be paying attention to if we want, say, relaxation versus energy?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the answer lies in the plant's chemical profile. We need to look past the label and focus on terpenes over type.
Okay, break that down. Terpenes over type.
So first you have the cannabinoids. Think THC, CBD. They're mainly responsible for the potency, the overall intensity of the effects, how strong it feels.
Got it. THC, CBD, it cools strengths.
Exactly. But then you have the terpenes. These are the aromatic compounds. They're in lots of plants, gives pine trees their smell, lemons their citrusy scent.
Ah, the smells and flavors.
Yes. But in cannabis, they do more than that. They actually shape the specific feel or the character of the high. They modulate the effects of the cannabinoids. They interact with our own body's endocannabinoid system in different ways. So, for example, some sources suggest strains high in the terpene myrcene often lead to more relaxing sedative effects, while strains rich in, say, limon or pine might feel more uplifting or energizing. And this happens regardless of whether the plant was labeled indica or sativa.
So focusing on indica sativa is like judging a book by its cover.
That's a perfect analogy. The real story, the actual experience, is determined by the chemistry inside the cannabinoids and, crucially, the terpenes, not the old botanical label.
Wow. That's a pretty fundamental shift in thinking. So given the science, why is the old indica sativa story still so persistent? Why do these labels still dominate dispensaries and conversations? Why does simple sell work so well here?
Well, there are a few powerful reasons. First, like we touched on, it's just simple. Humans like easy categories. Indica sativa provides a really convenient mental shortcut. In a market with tons of choices, this for sleep, that for energy, cuts through the confusion.
Reduces decision fatigue.
Exactly. And second, you have reinforcement. Bud tenders, the people guiding customers, often rely on these simple classifications. It's what they were taught, or it's just the easiest way to make a quick recommendation.
So it creates a cycle.
Right. A feedback loop where the myth keeps getting reinforced. And then there's a really powerful psychological factor, expectation bias.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically the idea that we tend to feel what we expect to feel. If someone tells you this indica will make you sleepy, your brain is kind of primed for that. You're more likely to interpret the feelings you get as sedation.
The placebo effect almost.
It's related, yeah.
Yeah.
Your expectation can genuinely color your perception of the experience, sometimes maybe even overriding the subtle nuances of the actual chemistry.
That's fascinating. It makes you wonder how much our expectations shape our reality in other areas, too.
It really does. How many labels do we accept that might be influencing us more than we realize?
So for our listeners, for you listening right now, if you're looking for a specific effect, what's the better way? What's the better map now that the old Indica Sativa lore is, well, shaky at best?
The experts we looked at are pretty clear on this. The way forward is better labeling, moving away from these outdated, often meaningless species names. Instead, the focus should be on labeling products with their actual chemical content. That means cannabinoid percentages, how much THC, how much CBD, etc.
Okay, the potency.
Yes, but just as importantly, maybe even more importantly for the type of effect, listing the dominant terpene profiles.
Yeah.
That's the real key to understanding the potential character of the high.
So look for the terps.
Exactly. The bottom line from the research is pretty blunt. Indica doesn't ensure sleep, and sativa doesn't ensure energy. Trust the lab, not the lore.
Trust the lab, not the lore. I like that.
It means being an active consumer. Ask questions. Ask to see the lab results. Ask about the terpenes, myrcene, limon, pine, linalool, whatever they might be. Don't just settle for indica or sativa.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for you listening? We started with these simple labels, indica and sativa, saw how they grew from botany into cultural shorthand for effects. Then we found out that modern science tells a much more complicated and frankly more interesting chemical story. It's about cannabinoids and especially terpenes, not the shape of the leaf. It's a really powerful reminder, isn't it, that sometimes the facts we think we know are just stories we've gotten used to, even if the science has moved on.
Absolutely. And understanding that difference between an old botanical name and the actual biochemistry, that's key to finding the experience you're actually looking for. And maybe think about this. How many other simple binaries, these easy either labels, exist in our lives? In health and personality and politics, could they also be obscuring a more complex, more accurate, maybe even more useful truth?
That's a great point to ponder. Next time you see a simple label promising a complex result, maybe pause for a second. Remember this deep dive. Question the lore, look for the lab or the data or the nuance. Keep digging deeper. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.